Good morning, everybody. I trust that you're doing well. I was going to try to use some technology to see if I can move the screen by myself, but that's not working for me. So, Luke, I'll need your help. But there was this is more than a few years ago, but back when I was in college, we were back home for a Christmas break, and my brothers were there as well. And we all went to church that morning, but while we were at church, it began to do some fun freezing rain. It always makes driving an adventure. And so we were heading back to my parents' house, and I was driving with my oldest brother next to me and his wife in the back, and then our parents were, and my other brother were in the car behind us. And as we're turning onto where my parents live, with the icy roads, you gotta hit the road just right. Otherwise, there's this nice ditch up ahead that your car could go into. And so I'm going like super slow. I got my older brother, his wife, I want to be a responsible driver. And so I'm taking this turn maybe 5 miles an hour. I mean, about as slow as you could go and still be moving. And all of a sudden, I notice my car starts to drift upward towards this ditch. I'm like, oh no. All right, so I'm going through all the things. I tap the brakes a little bit to try to see if I can get some traction. That's not working. I give just a little bit of gas. That doesn't do anything. And then my brother next to me is like, what are you doing, man? Like, are you trying to, have you tapped the brakes? I'm like, yeah, I'm tapping the brakes. And he's like, well, did you try to get my kid? Like, we're like verbally processing this as we're like slowly inching towards the ditch. And then I'm like, all right, everybody got seatbelts on? Everybody's good? All right, we're good. All right, we're going to go in, guys. We're heading that way. And he's like, all right, Steve, like straighten up the wheel so we go in nice and smooth. And like, we're just like processing all of this as we just see it coming. And then we slowly enter into the ditch and go down. We're all safe. And then all of a sudden we see our parents drive by. My mother's face is like, what happened? Like, icy roads. And so they hit the turn just right and made it. And we're like, all right. What do? It's a Sunday. Car is stuck. Like we're safe. Luckily, and my parents just live like maybe a quarter mile down the road, so we're able to walk. And my parents, they're always looking out for us. Like we got AAA. Like we'll call them up and get the car out. And the tow truck guy comes, and at that point, he gets a call over the radio. It's like, yeah, it was technically a blackout on towing because the weather is so bad. He's like, but you guys will be my last one. We'll get you out. And it is an adventure of him trying to get us out. Where there's one point where he's trying to winch up the car, but then all of a sudden his tow truck starts sliding. You see him like bracing up against the tow truck, trying not to get run over by it. But eventually he puts like chains on his tow truck on the tires and is able to just pull it out. I mean, it was quite the event. But like in that moment when the car is stuck, like me and my brother, like we can't get this out. Like we're just like completely helpless. We need somebody who has the tools and the experience to get this vehicle out of a ditch safely. And he did. Like it was so slow there was no damage to the car. But I mean, like, have you ever in your life just been in a situation or in a scenario where you're stuck? You can't help yourself. You need somebody else to come along and help you. I mean, maybe it's not a situation, but maybe there's like a disease or something you're struggling with where you got to humble yourself. Like, I got to go to the doctor. I got to go to the dentist. There are times where I'm like prideful. I'm like, it'll be fine. It'll go away. But there are times where I got to humble myself and then go see somebody. Maybe there's like an addiction or some sin that you struggle with where you're like, you just can't beat it. Like, what do? Do you just keep going by your own willpower? Like, I got this, I can overcome it, I can do this. It's not a big deal. Other people get by this all the time. Or can we humble ourselves, go to the Lord? Can we go to our other friends, brothers and sisters in Christ and ask for help to overcome whatever it may be? This is what we're going to be looking at today as we are continuing talking about, God is with us. Last week Ryan looked at how God is, like our identity is in Him. Like He has given us hope. He has claimed us as children of God. Like we have this hope that we belong to Him. And then today we're going to be looking at how He is, the healer for the broken. He is a savior for those that are lost. And I think we can see this in the story in Luke 8:40-56. This is where Jesus is in his ministry. He's out, healing people, performing miracles. He's teaching, and in the story, he heals a couple of people, and it's just an amazing story. I love this story so much. And so I think the big idea, the question I'll be asking is how do we see Jesus as our healer? What are ways that we understand that and see how he is our Savior, our rescuer? So I'm just going to tell the story, and then I'll go back through and kind of look at some passages from it. And so during this time, Jesus had just been over in Galilee. He's been doing some ministry with the Gentiles. At the beginning of the story, we see him coming back to Jerusalem. And as he's getting off the boat, there's this crowd of people there to welcome him back. Like they want to hear from him. They want to see what he may do. And one of the people that comes to him, there's this man, his name is Jairus. He comes basically like running to Jesus, and he falls down at Jesus' feet, and he just pleads to him to come to his house because his daughter, his 12-year-old daughter, is sick and is dying. Now Jairus, he's a synagogue leader. This would have been quite the scene to have seen a Jewish synagogue leader coming and pleading and falling down at the feet of Jesus. People would have been like, what is happening? Like, this is like shameful, disgraceful. Like he should be going to other Jewish leaders to seek help, not to this unknown teacher at the time. So this would have caused quite the scene. But Jesus agrees to go with Jairus to his house to see his daughter. And so they begin the way through Jerusalem, and the streets are very narrow, so people are just pushing in, bumping shoulder to shoulder as they are going through this, to the point where it's like almost crushing him. I mean, that's just how congested and tight this is. And in this crowd, there's this woman who she has been bleeding for 12 years. And we know from some of the other Gospels about how she has spent almost all of her life savings trying to get medical help to be cured of this. But nothing has worked. And so this woman, she begins to inch her way and push through the crowd, trying to get to Jesus. And eventually she touches just the edge of his cloak, just like the fringes. And instantly she can feel that she has been healed. Again, like this takes a lot of courage for her, because since she is bleeding, she is unclean by the Mosaic law, so she is supposed to be removed from people. She is not to be near them, let alone touching them, but then to touch this teacher. She was taking a big chance doing this. And at her touching Jesus, Jesus stops. And Jesus says, "Who touched me?" Everyone's like, no, I didn't touch you, Jesus. No, I never would have done that. And then one of his apostles, Peter, says, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." He's like, "Jesus, like who isn't touching you? Like we're on this mission here trying to get to Jairus' house because his daughter is dying, and you're wanting to stop and be like, who touched me?" He's like, we gotta go. We got a mission. We have a purpose. But Jesus said, "No, someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." I mean, Jesus in his godly character, he can feel when something supernatural happens. And so at this silence I can only imagine Jesus like, all right, who touched me? This woman, she's just terrified because she knows the Mosaic law. She knows that she should not have, been there, two, touched a teacher. And so she was hoping to just go unnoticed, but she realized in this moment she has no choice but to come forward and admit to what she has done. So coming forward, trembling, she falls at Jesus' feet. She goes on to explain why she has touched him, and then what has happened because of that. Not knowing what Jesus is going to say, but Jesus just looks at her and says, "Daughter." He claims her as his own. "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." So Jesus is just loving. He just wants to affirm to her what has taken place, that it wasn't some magic supernatural thing. It's like, no, but your faith in God is what has healed you. And in that way, he also confirms to those that are present, she is clean now. She is no longer sick or unclean, but she has been healed. He tells her to go in peace. So while this is all going on, somebody approaches Jairus and tells him, "Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore." You can only imagine the emotions that Jairus is feeling. He's with Jesus, they're going, he sees this woman being healed, he's like, all right, there's hope. But then he gets this news, like, your daughter is dead. It'd be so deflating. But Jesus, I love this, what Jesus does, he looks directly, I just imagine him looking directly into Jairus' eyes, and he says, don't be afraid. Just believe, and your daughter will be healed. I just imagine, like, okay. Jairus, like, all right. Like, trying to grapple with all these emotions and feelings. Okay, Jesus says, don't be afraid. So they carry on. And they go to Jairus' house. And when they get there, I mean, I should imagine there's a crowd still with them, but only Jesus, Peter, James, John, and the parents, Jairus and his wife, go into the house. And at this point, there's this scene where there's these professional wailers. And like, this was a part of Jewish custom back then, where there was a death, like you hire some wailers to help kind of like and usher them into the next season of life. And so there are these professional wailers just grieving the loss of this little girl. And Jesus looks at them and says, stop wailing. She's not dead. She's but asleep. And they erupt with laughter. It's like, this is their job. They've seen a dead body before. They know what's going on. And so there's like, who is this guy coming in here telling us to stop wailing because she's not dead but asleep? They're like, this guy, this is Jesus. But Jesus, and and who he is, he goes down and picks up the girl's hand and says, my child, get up. And instantly her spirit is returned to her, and she stood up. At this, Jesus just tells the parents to get her something to eat. She's probably hungry. But then not only that, so it's like he took care of her spiritual needs, and they need to take care of her physical needs as well. And of course, at this, the parents are just astonished, bewildered. And Jesus, he just tells them not to tell anyone what he has done. Which is just, it's an interesting thing. I don't fully understand why. It's like maybe he just doesn't want some of these like really big miracles to get out quite yet. I mean, he just healed a lady in the streets, but in this one, this is a big one, raising somebody from the dead. That one, he's like, let's keep that on the down low for right now. But again, like, I love the story of what we see about how Jesus, he has compassion. He assists, this Jewish synagogue leader. He's probably in like an elite class at this time. He's the wealthy of the wealthy, taken care of, and he wants to help him out, and his family. But not only that, but then there's this woman who's probably been an outcast for the past 12 years, probably very poor, destitute. Jesus loves and has compassion on her as well. And so we just see his ministry reaches all different types of people. So what can we take away from this when we reflect on Jesus as our healer? And I think the first thing that stood out to me is we see Jesus as our healer by waiting on him. Jesus is our healer, our rescuer, and sometimes it takes time. It means we have to have patience. So Luke 8:41, it says, then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house, because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. So we see waiting in a couple different places. And with Jairus, this has been a very urgent thing. And now he has to wait for Jesus to walk to his house. And I'm sure, as a loving father that Jairus is, he's probably very anxious, trying to get there as quick as he can. But then we also see this other woman who's been bleeding for 12 years. 12 years, that's a long time to have this. I can't imagine the uncomfortableness, the pain, the maybe disgrace because she can't be in her community. That's a lot of things that she is waiting, looking for somebody to heal her. And then they meet Jesus. And then we jump ahead to verse 45. Who touched me? Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. And so we see Jesus taking this moment with this woman. Like, he doesn't want to pass it by. Like, oh yeah, I healed you. That's cool. Let's keep going. No, he wants to sit. He wants to rest in that, because I think he really wants to show Jairus a bigger miracle than just healing his daughter, but he wants to show that he has authority over death. And so there's even more waiting. Even when we feel like it's urgent, Jesus is like, let's wait. This is very important to process what happened with this one woman being healed. And then we see in 49 through 50, while Jesus speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead. He said, don't bother the teacher anymore. Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe, and she will be healed. I mean, just what an encouragement. Don't be afraid, just believe. I mean, how many of us need to hear that when we're in a season of waiting? You know, whatever it may look like, just don't be afraid, just believe. It's like Jesus was with him. He was literally walking with him through this time. And I'm sure Jairus' emotions were all over the place. I mean, he knew his daughter was dying, and he's waiting, and he sees this woman who has been miraculously healed, so I'm sure that gives him some hope. Then he's also terrified because someone told him his daughter's dead. I'm sure his emotions are all over, but yet we see his faithfulness, and like, even though someone's like, don't bother the teacher anymore, like, just leave him alone, but Jairus, in faithfulness and trusting Jesus, like, no, like, let's keep going. Let's continue to walk through this. So waiting. Man, it's like one of those things, like, as you get older, you get better at managing waiting and trying to be patient, but it's something that we're always going to be wrestling with, because there's always going to be new things that we have to wait and be patient for. And in my studying, I came across this poem that's about still waiting. Let me read this to you. It says, waiting, yes, patiently waiting, till next steps made plain shall be, to hear with the inner hearing, the voice that will call for me. Waiting, yes, quietly waiting, no need for an anxious dread. Shall he not assuredly guide me, who giveth me daily bread? Waiting, yes, hopefully waiting, with hope that needn't grow dim. The Master is pledged to guide me, and my eyes are unto him. Waiting, yes, expectantly waiting. Perhaps it may be today. The Master will quickly open the gate to my future way. Waiting, yes, trustfully waiting. I know, though I've waited long, that while he withholds his purpose, his waiting cannot be wrong. Waiting, yes, waiting, still waiting. The Master will not be late. He knoweth that I am waiting for him to unlatch the gate. It's written by J.D. Smith. And I just love the different aspects of waiting the author brings out, about patiently waiting, that we can have confidence that he will come, that he will answer us, and then quietly waiting, not being discouraged, not being anxious, not having like a negative attitude. It's like, no, like he will surely continue to provide for us. That hopefully waiting, knowing that he's going to be there, like we should fix our eyes upon him, and then expectantly waiting, having this confidence that yes, he's going to act, and maybe today is the day, and trustfully waiting, knowing that his timing is perfect in all things. And so, I mean, for me, like that just gives me like a frame of reference to think about, like when we're in those seasons of waiting, like how should we feel? What should we think about? It's about being patient, and then also having hope and expectancy and trust. These are all great things for us to ponder on and grow in whenever we are in a season of waiting. So I see the application here, if I had to summarize it in like a sentence, is we must be patient and trust that Jesus will give us what we need, really, and when we need it. So I encourage you, whatever's going on in your life. Maybe it's a current circumstance you're in with a job, or maybe you've got a physical problem that you're just really wrestling with, or a sin or addiction or whatever it may be, but just continue to persevere. Fix your eyes on Jesus. Trust him. He has not forgotten you. He has not forsaken you, but he is there with you to lead you, guide you, and support you, and that he will help us in our greatest times of need. So we wait and be patient. And second, we see Jesus as our healer by boldly going to him. We see this with Jairus in verse 41. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house. Again, I know I mentioned it once, but man, this would have been just shocking and appalling back then. It's like a Jewish synagogue leader would never fall down before somebody else, and then to beg and plead them to do something. Like, it's just unheard of. But then for Jairus to do this publicly, before so many other people, this definitely could have affected his status. This could have affected his job. And so I can only imagine that this was probably Jairus' like last hope. Like, this is like his Hail Mary. Like, I've tried everything else. Like I've got to go to this teacher, this Jesus who's been doing miracles. Like, maybe he can help me out. But we see Jairus is willing to humble himself and ask Jesus for help. And then we see with the woman in verse 44. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. Again, I bet she was aware of the Mosaic law. I bet she knew what she was going up against when she made this decision to approach Jesus. This would have taken a lot of boldness, even though she was trying to do it in a very subtle, kind of quiet way. But that still would have been a big risk for her. And then 47 to 48. Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet in the presence of all the people. She told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. There she had to be bold and step forward. It's like, yes, Jesus presented the opportunity. He laid everything out, but she still came forward and was able to share what Jesus had done. And so I think in these verses that see, like, we should have boldness to go to Jesus. I mean, hopefully we don't see him as our last plan, our last ditch effort, but we see him as plan A. Like, we should take all things before the Lord and approach him with great boldness and humility, seeking his help. But also in those last verses where then the woman came forward to share her testimony. I pray that when Jesus does answer our miracles, that then we can go out in boldness sharing, like, look, this is what Jesus has done. This is what Jesus can do in your life as well. That we have boldness to share that as well, because that was very important for Jesus, because he didn't want just this woman to be blessed, but he wanted others to know what he's able to do. He wanted her faith to be seen. Going to somebody to ask of something isn't always the easiest. There have been moments in my life, in my jobs, where I've had to go to supervisors or people above them asking for them to do something. Not too long ago in my job, I was doing some IT things, and working in an insurance agency, and some of our agents' laptops were beginning to break more frequently because they were older. And our IT director, he was on medical leave, so he wasn't there full time. He's like, all right, Steve, I need you to do this. He's like, we need to order like 6 laptops, and we need to get so many desktops, and you need to go to the vice president with this request. And like, he's trying to like build me up. He's like, you can do this. We've got the facts. We know how old the laptops are. Like, this is what we need. Like you can do this. Just speak confident. We got a plan, and ask them for, with all this technology, you're looking at like $10,000 at least. And like, we're a small organization. I'm like, I don't know. I really don't want to. I don't like money talk. I don't like having this kind of conversation. But now I've got to ask them, like, I wasn't even supposed to be in IT, but just because of circumstances, I got kind of pulled in. I'm like, I don't want this responsibility. This is why I kind of got out of IT, but like, you can do it. And so I should remember going in there to the vice president. I was like, hey, I mean, she's aware of the computers failing. Like, hey, like, here's our current computers we have. We think we need to replace at least like these 6 or 7. Here's what we need. And even within our office, we got to get some desktop computers replaced. This is how much we need. She's like, just look in. Yeah, that seems reasonable. She's like, you know what? Let's get a couple extra laptops and a couple extra desktops just in case. I was like, whew, cool. I'm getting more than what I asked for. Like, I had built it all up in my mind. Like, this is going to be awful. She's going to be like, what are you talking about? We're not going to spend all this money on this technology. But she's like, no, absolutely. Let's give some more. And for me, like, man, like, it's like a picture of Jesus. You know, it's like we often like, oh God, like I've read the Bible. I know how much of a sinner I am. I know how I'm not overcoming the sin. Like I know how I'm just continuing to persevere in my own struggles and not really turning to you. And we're like, I can't go to God for this. Like, what's going to happen? But what happens? Like, He loves us. He's a gracious Father. He's not going to give us just what we need, but He's going to give in excess. And I know sometimes we're like, well, that doesn't always happen right away. It's like, yeah, I know. It doesn't always happen right away. Sometimes we've got to, maybe God's trying to break us down, to really break down our pride, to really submit to Him. But in His graciousness, He will give us abundantly more than we will ever need or expect. So I encourage you, I implore you to go boldly before the Father when whatever happens in your life. You know, whether it's like, I've got a hangnail, like, this really hurts. Like, God, give me the strength to persevere in this hangnail. It's really annoying. You know, like even the small trivial things, like you might seem like that's stupid, but no, like really trust Jesus for everything. I had a professor in my seminary where every day he would leave like a Bible study, and every day on his way home there's a McDonald's on his path. And he's like, I could really go for a shake. I could really go for a McDonald's shake. He just loved them. And so on his drive home, he'd be like, Jesus, can I have a shake today? Like he would seek Him out. He's like, it's a temptation. Like, I don't know if I should have that or not. Like, he's like, some days Jesus would be like, yeah, you can have that shake. And some days he would get it, and then some other times, no, not right now. Again, like us in the class, we're like, a shake? You're really praying to God about if you can have a McDonald's shake? But again, like he was just truly just submitting his life, just boldly going before the Lord on all his desires. I mean, it was a challenge to us. Like, okay, like, am I really trusting God with everything in my life, everything that's going on? That He is our plan A, and knowing that no matter how silly it may be, that He wants to hear our desires, He wants to hear our struggles, and in that He wants to meet us where we are and help us. And then lastly, we see Jesus as our healer by recognizing His authority over all things. Now I've got verse 844 up there. I know I've read it a couple times, but we just see that as soon as she touched His cloak, immediately she was healed. And I love that in both of these scenarios, we see Jesus, his healing is rapid. It is right away. That there's no doubt that she has been healed. And then at the end, verses 51 to 55, when He arrived at the house of Jairus, He did not let anyone go in with Him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. "Stop wailing," Jesus said. "She is not dead, but asleep." They laughed at Him, knowing that she was dead. But He took her by the hand and said, "My child, get up." Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Again, like people might have been able to dismiss the healing of the woman. Like, maybe it finally just healed and Jesus happened to be there. It's like they might be able to rationalize that away because us as humans, we're good at rationalizing things away. But for this little girl, it's like they had third party there witnessing what has happened. The wailers, like, no, she was dead. Like they confirmed it a couple times, even in those verses, like, no, she was dead. But then Jesus instantly healed her and she stood up. Like, you can't fake that. So we just see his authority not only over our bodies, but then over life and death as well. Like, nobody can claim that. And so we just see his complete authority over all things. And I was processing through, like, man, what's a good example of somebody having complete authority? And initially my brain is going to like authoritarianism or like dictatorships, but often those don't turn out well in human history. So I'm like, that's not really a good example of Jesus and his authority. And so then I was like, what else? I thought of, well, like movie directors. Like, they typically have complete authority all over their project. And like one example came to mind was James Cameron and Avatar. I mean, how many years has it been since the original Avatar came out? I mean, we're looking at 12, 14 years, I think. But like, he's had complete authority over that project. Like, no, he's only going to release the sequel until he feels like it is ready. And like, he had to wait for technology and computer advancement to get up before it could compete with his own vision in his head of what he wanted to see. And so for me, like, man, he has complete authority over that project and that movie. That he can delay a project 12 years. Because who releases a sequel like 12 or 14, a decade after the original movie? Like, from the movie industry sense, like, that's ridiculous. But James Cameron's like, nope, I've got authority over this project. I am going to delay it until it is perfect and until it is ready to be released. So for Jesus, we must see Jesus as capable of handling all of our problems. He has complete authority over all things. Yeah, just what a great encouragement that is. And I know sometimes in our lives today, we look at these miracles and we don't think that Jesus is still moving that same way today, but he still is. Like, there's still plenty of stories out there, and that's why we need to be sharing the stories that are happening in our own lives as well, so we can give testimony and encouragement to one another about how Jesus is moving. But he is truly capable of handling all of our problems. So Jesus, we see him as our healer by patiently waiting for him, trusting him in all things. We see him as a healer by boldly going before him, knowing that he wants to hear them. And then we see him as being capable of handling all of our needs because he has authority over all things.